Hey everyone, Wisdom Say here. That's interesting. I didn't even know that Supras can evolve. Like, how does that work? But whatever. Pokemon references aside, we're here for a couple races on Brands Hatch, and in all the races I'll be showing today, we will be using the new GR Supra. And this was a car that you could get by doing a survey a couple months ago, and eventually the game gave it to you for free. And yeah, so I definitely took advantage of that because, well, I just love this thing. Don't ask why. But yeah, so here in this video, we're going to conduct an experiment and see how this car does in this track with a bunch of angry Meganes hanging out right behind us. So as we start the race, I'm going to quickly find out that this car doesn't really like to turn that much. So we go through this first turn and I go a little bit wide. I kind of had that mentality of using the braking points on the Megane Trophy, as that was the car that I set the lap times on earlier this week. And this turn was probably the most difficult turn that I had to deal with in this car, just because it loved to go a bit wide, so I wasn't able to hit the apex. I get a bad exit, and those who are behind me have advantage over me. Part of that is because we started pretty close to each other, and the other thing is the street that we just went through. If you get a good exit, you can definitely go a lot faster than those around you, and with the slipstream, your chances of catching up to someone and potentially overtaking them is a lot higher. Luckily, we were able to keep them back. They didn't really have a chance to overtake to begin with. And yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and get ready to complete the first lap. And one of the hard things about Brands Hatch is that the track width is pretty narrow, so it's going to be a little harder to complete an overtake, but at the same time it's a lot easier for you to make a mistake, hit the grass, and your race is pretty much over. So as we complete the first lap, I decided not to defend for some weird reason. I think I just knew that the Megane Trophy just had a much better exit than I did. But we're going to start to battle it out a little bit as he goes wide, and I just try to squeeze on in, and it's just really difficult for me to try to get that perfect exit to attempt another overtake. So he's going to go ahead and stay in the front. I'm not worrying too much about the person behind me as they're a little bit further back, and as we both don't know how to take this turn, it's a pretty easy turn to mess up, but in the Supra it's a little bit harder to take that turn and get the most out of it, especially on this car. But we're just going to go ahead and just try to stay as close as we can to the car in front of us as he goes a little bit wide. He got a slightly faster exit than I did, and one of the things that I don't like about this car is that it just has a hard time turning. So on this track, I'm definitely going to have a bit of a harder time. As I end up sliding into the grass, the car behind me also ends up in the grass. I end up rejoining, try to give the car next to me a bit of space, but he ends up bumping into me, and another car ends up bumping him off and ends up spinning out. And I was just amazed at what just happened. We ended up having some crazy stuff going on. I'm surprised I didn't even get a penalty, but my tires are dirty. Now I'm trying to keep my car from spinning out, and there's just a big gap, so it's going to be a bit hard for those behind to catch up. So that was a bit of some questionable driving from all of us. And after that, the car in first place, all he has to do is just not bin it at all. And yeah, so he's pretty much got the win. I just have to try and make sure that the car doesn't want to slide on or understeer onto the grass again, as that turn that I enter the grass on is a really dangerous turn, and it's really easy to get onto it, and even just getting a smidge of your tires onto it can spell disaster. So we end up taking a second place finish for this first race. Not exactly the results I wanted to go after, especially after the mess that I ended up creating. So that was the first race. Let's go ahead and go on to the second one. Alright, so now here we are in the second race, and we still got a bunch of angry Megane Trophies hanging out right behind us, and they're probably planning to kick my butt, especially after I caused that chaos that resulted in at least one of them spinning out. Let's go ahead and skip on over a little bit to the first turn. As we go through this turn a bit nice and slowly, let's try and make sure I don't end up spinning off onto the gravel, because that can be a bit messy. There's already a car hanging out right behind us, and as this race is short, they're going to want to try to take advantage of me, take advantage of the opportunity the moment it presents itself as soon as it can, because I think the average lap time around here is about a minute 30 in a Group 4 car, so there's not that much time. You have about 6 minutes to try to bring yourself to the top. And if you've done this race, you know that it's nothing. So once again, you got to make the most out of what you can with the short time that you have. So as I end up going through that turn pretty wide again, because once again, I just can't get this car to rotate. The Megane Trophy, he's been hanging out right behind us for pretty much the entire race up to this point. And at this point, I know that he's going to try to make a move soon. At this point, he probably has a good idea of what my weaknesses are within the terms of this car and track itself. So once we approach that part of the track, he could definitely try to make a move. As I end up going just a little bit wide, he's going to end up getting a little bit closer, and I'm getting a little bit nervous. I end up going through that turn a little bit slower because I went off track just for a tad bit of time, and he ends up poking in, so I have to go on the defensive, and I end up going a bit wider than usual through this turn, and I just see him getting a better exit. Now to the drag race to the first turn as we start the final lap, and we're going to see if I can try to outpace him, and unfortunately not, and he's just going to go ahead and take first place. We still have a lap to go, so anything can happen. He could potentially end up messing up somewhere along the way, and as we both end up sliding around through that second turn, things are getting pretty heated up. Third place is hanging out right behind us. He's trying to see where he can try to poke through to take second place. So now I have to worry about two people for this final lap. I have to try to make sure that I can catch up to first place, and at the same time I have to try to make sure that third place, doesn't take advantage of me. And it's going to be pretty difficult as first place is a little bit further away, but second place is just hanging out right behind us. So now I'm hoping that first place makes a monumental mistake that can open a huge window of opportunity to try and take first place. He goes through that turn a little bit slower, but still nowhere near enough to try to do any move as he ends up sliding, but he ends up saving it. It's an awesome job saving it right there. And I end up going a little bit off track, and I'm just starting to slide around again. Third place is on the move now. He's going to see if he can try to squeeze his way through, but I'm going to go on the defensive again, and just like the last lap, I end up getting a bit of a slower exit. Now it's a drag race. Second place ends up getting a better exit, but unfortunately he just has the speed to secure a second place finish. So from first to third, I mean, this was a better race than the last one where I ended up creating the chaos, but this wasn't exactly the result I was looking for. So other than that, let's just go ahead and go on over to the third race. We still have a bunch of angry Meganes hanging out right behind us, and we have a couple familiar faces with us again, so good to see you all again. And we're going to go ahead and see if we can try to actually keep first place for once. So skipping on over to halfway through the first lap, or a little bit after that, the Megane Trophy hanging out behind us is a bit closer than in the previous race. Pretty much has a solid idea of what my weaknesses are, and I'm just trying not to be so blatantly obvious with that, trying to correct my mistakes if I can. But that's not really working as he's hanging out right behind us. And at this point, I have a feeling that he's going to try to make a move soon, possibly as we approach the first turn. So I'm going to go ahead and close on in for a little bit, see what he does, but he's just hanging out right behind us, so he's not going to make a move just yet. So as we go through the first turn, go a bit too deep inside, and I'm hitting the gravel just enough to end up spinning out, and I accidentally end up taking out the poor soul. The poor Megane took him out, and I ended up taking myself out as well. And I felt really bad about that. I did not mean to do that, and I was actually pretty surprised that I didn't get ghosted as I was starting to spin out, because at that point I would have imagined that I'd get ghosted. I'd end up going through the other Megane, but that wasn't the case. I ended up taking him out with me, and he's probably not too happy about that. So if you're watching this video, sorry, I didn't mean it. So I'm going to see if I can try to squeeze on in. As I end up psyching myself out, I end up on the grass, and I'm trying to make my way through it as I end up spinning out again. And now at this point, I'm just feeling kind of stupid, as I know that this race is pretty much over. And as I said earlier in the video, making a little mistake, going just a little bit too wide to hit the grass or the gravel on this track can potentially ruin your entire race. And as you saw, my race was ruined, and I accidentally ruined someone else's race in the process. So yeah, so this race went nowhere according to plan. It was a complete disaster. This experiment was not worth it. Let's just go ahead and end the video. Okay, so I lied about that. There's actually one more race that I want to cover. This was another interesting, cool race that I want to show you all. So first of all, I don't know why my internet connection was so bad on the day that I was recording this video, but I ended up finding out the hard way, or sort of the hard way. But that aside, we already have a group of angry Meganes hanging out right behind us, or Megane Trophies to be specific, and he's going to be hanging out right behind us, and I accidentally blocked him, and I didn't mean to do that. He flashes lights at me because he wasn't too happy about that. So once again, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So I'm just going to make sure that I try not to block him, because this track is narrow and it's a bit of a jerk move to block someone like that, especially if they have a much better exit than you did. So we're just going to skip on over to the start of the third lap. Nothing really happening, so I'm just over here having a jolly all good time and just try and make sure I don't mess up. As I end up sliding around a little bit, almost messed up, but luckily I was able to prevent disaster from happening. And as the two Megane Trophies now are hanging out right behind us, I'm just going to start to defend a little bit more, trying to make it really hard for them, or even impossible for them to go ahead and pass us. We go through this turn again. Once again, that turn that I just don't know how to deal with for some reason in this car. For some reason, out of the many times I did this race, I think I was only able to get that turn right like very few times. I don't know, it's just something about that turn that just keeps on throwing me off. So as we just continue along this race, the Megane Trophy is still hanging out right behind us, and that's going to make me a little bit nervous, especially as we're getting closer to the final lap. So at some point, they're going to try to do whatever they can to get a window of opportunity open and make an attempt to overtake me. As I end up going sliding through that turn, so now they have an opportunity to pass, I'm just going to go ahead and defend. There's two cars that are hanging out with us, and I'm just going to defend as much as I can, trying to make sure I give the car on my left the space so I don't end up pushing them off track. Defense well done. And another Megane Trophy is going to try to squeeze on in, but I just end up defending the heck out of it. Go through this turn a little bit slower just because I'm trying to defend as much as I can. And I'm going to keep defending right here, use my usual braking point as I end up getting a little bump from behind. But that's actually going to help bring me a bit more forward, as the two Meganes are now fighting against each other. So with us on the final lap, now's the time to try to build that gap between us and the two Meganes. And for some reason, I tried to really nail this turn, and I ended up going a lot slower, but I technically nailed it, but whatever. So I went a little bit slower, and I'm just trying to make sure that I just don't mess up on any of these turns. And it looks like that the Megane Trophies behind us got their problems sorted out. They decided to fully focus on me because I am not a Megane Trophy. I just have to make sure that I just don't make any big mistakes, because especially on this track, big mistakes can be amplified, especially if you go off track here. And if I do that, then they're definitely going to pass me. As we go through the second to last turn, they're still slowly catching up, as this track is better suited to them than it is to the Supra. We go through the final turn, try to make sure that we don't mess up on this turn, and there we go, we got this done. they're definitely not going to catch up to us. And we crossed the line. And we finally got a really good result. We ended up finishing first place in the Supra on a track where it is at a disadvantage. Do I suggest doing this? No. Well, I mean, you can, but it's a bit frustrating, especially when you know you can get a better lap time, but the car, it just doesn't want to do what you want it to do. But this was still fun to do. I just wanted to try something a bit different. And that is it for this video. And once again, I just want to give a huge thanks to every single one of you who have supported the channel, as we just hit 2,600 subscribers. Still trying to wrap my head around getting 2,000 subscribers about a month ago. But I mean, this is still something that is just awesome. That's the best way I can just describe this. It is just awesome. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. MCA, the world's most okay player, and I'll see you in the next video.